Hello and welcome to another chess video. I am FIDE Master Ingvar Jóhannesson from Iceland. And yeah, Iceland baby, that's it. And we're going to have a look at the game from the Tata Steel Masters. It's round 6. And we're going to have a look at the game between the world champion, Magnus Carlsen, and the world number 1. Against the, well, world number 3 or 4. He was world number 3 on January 1st, but I believe Ding has passed him now in live ratings, but Mamedyarov is the official world number 3. And, well, Mamedyarov, he has been doing quite well against Carlsen, because actually Carlsen hasn't won any of the last 8 encounters between them. Yeah, Mamedyarov, he sort of had a big spike at the end of 2017 and in 2018, where he increased his rating, went over 2800, had a really good year, and yeah, 7 draws and 1 win against Magnus in the last 8 games. So seems like the more solid style is paying dividends. You know, not always going for it, but he can play really powerful and chess that's fun to watch. But he's mixing it up more these days and mixing solid with imaginative play at times. In this one, Magnus had white, and he opened with knight to f3, which is, well, slight surprise. He used all the moves e4, d4, and c4 in the World Championship match, but never played knight to f3. Knight f3 is usually a transposition tool, but sometimes it becomes its own opening, a ready opening. But in this case, at the d5, Carlsen lets us go d4, and we now have a queen's gambit accepted because black takes on c4, accepts the gambit. Although this is not really a gambit, although it's called queen's gambit, because the pawn is easily won back, as Carlsen does here. But this is a very solid opening for black, who just aims to equalize, and as you'll see, the lines tend to get really symmetrical. Caruana has used the queen's gambit accepted to good effect. I remember Sweedler played it for a while as well. But okay, we have b3, b6, and now Carlsen takes on c5, and we immediately trade queens. So go to like a queenless middle game. And yeah, normal development, bishop b2, the knight comes out, bishop b7, and here we have basically a symmetrical position. You see that all the pawns are exactly the same. Yeah, and the light pieces, the bishops and the knights, the only difference is white has castled and played rook d1 versus black playing a6. Slightly more useful moves for white perhaps, but now he starts to reroute his bishop, this one. On c4, it's sort of, I mean, since it's a queenless middle game, we're not going to sacrifice here, so the bishop belongs probably on this diagonal, trying to do something against the other bishop after black castled. Knight to c4 by Carlsen. Another reason to vacate the c4 square to give that square to a knight. Rook after d8. And in the previous game, where this position was reached between Tomaszewski and Karakin, Tomaszewski played rook a to c1, a natural move. And that game ended in a draw. But in this one, Carlsen, he played knight to e1. And he wants to put this knight on d3, feels like it belongs there, and he wants to play bishop f3 later, maybe, to yeah, play against the bishop on b7. Bishop to d5. Rook a to c1, rook a c8, and knight to d3. So of course, if white can, he would take on c5 and get the bishop pair, so the bishop retreats to e7. Knight c to e5. So a very slight edge for white. I mean, he has slightly better knights, but all in all, this is a position that in most cases would be played out to a draw. And in the old days, they probably would have just offered a draw here and accepted. But I think they have a 30 move rule here in this tournament, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. The bishop retreated, the knight went back to c4, bishop to d5. So a small little repetition dance, but Carlsen didn't want that and played the knight back to d2, bishop back to b7, and now Carlsen brings the king. So a lot of maneuvering, there's really not much going on. There's no pawn tension. I mean, neither side has moved a pawn past the its own third rank, so not much tension, not many tactics. So the knight went back to d2, and now he finally plays bishop to f3, offering the trade of bishops. But Mamedyarov doesn't want to trade, plays knight to d5. Knight comes back to c4. And now b5. I'm not sure if this move is really necessary. Maybe black should just stay and, you know, just keep control over all these squares, because once you play b5, you are giving up these squares. Doesn't seem like a huge issue. The knight comes into a5, and the bishop comes to a8. So the knight is, I mean, it's a little bit posted in black's face, but it isn't really doing anything, and this bishop is firmly covering these squares, so not much to worry about for black, really. a3 now by Carlsen, covering the b4 square. Not now allowing any knight b4, because then you might get into trouble with the knight, actually. And now Mamedyarov, yeah, instead of you know, staying put, just playing a move like king f8 or something like that, he plays g5, going for some yeah, space gaining maneuvers there on the king side. h3 from Carlsen, and now f5. Carlsen plays b4. We have king f7. Funnily enough, if we didn't have an 8th rank, this would be checkmate, but we do have an 8th rank, so. But now Carlsen plays knight b3. And what white has got going for him is the black squares here on e5 and c5. It's very little to work with, and yeah, if black just temporizes and doesn't really do anything, okay, the game goes on. But I think we can criticize a little bit this move by Mamedyarov, which trades off the black squared bishops, which Magnus is happy to do, chops it off, and now he gets much better control over this nice c5 square, where he puts a knight immediately. Mamedyarov offers bishop trade, Carlsen refuses. Partly because if he trades bishop, then black can also just jump into c4 because we have a symmetrical position. But keeping a bishop, we can always now chop on c4 if a knight comes there, and in most cases aim for a good knight against a bad bishop situation, because black now has a lot of pawns on light squares. Knight c4 was played, a4 trying to undermine the knight, and now knight d to b6. And yeah, this more or less forces black to go into an ending where we finally get some imbalance. Carlsen now takes the pawn on a6, and having said a, Mamedyarov has to say b, and he has to take on e3. So he gets a pawn and a rook for 2 minor pieces. Carlsen correctly plays king to g1. If he had played king to f2, after rook takes, rook c2, his king would be rather badly posted here on f2, so it's better on g1. Now he plays bishop to f3, bishop b4 by Mamedyarov. The knight comes back, and we have some trades here. So now we have this endgame where black has yeah, a rook and a pawn for 2 minor pieces. In general, the 2 minor pieces are to be preferred, and at first glance it looks like this pawn should be really dangerous for black. Objectively, this is probably a draw, and yeah, the computers just say 0.00. Mamedyarov plays the correct e5, but now, yeah, the move that I thought Carlsen would play, the very human bishop b7, just preparing to shelter the pawn. e4, pawn is pushed, knight c5, and the king comes into the game, and after a6, black is forced to play rook a2 to yeah, prevent the pawn from going to a7. Carlsen now has time for bishop to c6, attacking the b5 pawn. But this is the critical moment of the game. Mamedyarov plays h5 here, which is simply too slow. If he had played king d4 or e3, as well pointed out by computers and Carlsen in the post-game interview, the lines transpose, so it doesn't matter if you start with king d4 or e3. Let's just start with king d4, bishop takes b5, e3. This forces the king to move, because otherwise we have time to push the pawn, take, take and come back, and we're in time to stop the pawn. So king f1 is forced, but now comes f4, and the natural move here is to play knight to a4 and block the rook from the pawn, but after the check, king e2, rook a2. This is a draw because the king can't approach on account of e2 check. Bishop takes, rook takes a4, so you'd have to stop the pawn, but now we have time for king e3, and white actually loses here, so he would have to take the perpetual, and this would end in a draw. A very likely sample variation if king d4 and e3 had happened, but h5 happened, and this actually is too slow. And after g4 takes, Carlsen played correctly here, bishop to c4, attacking the rook, making way for his b pawn in the process. Very important. Rook to a1, king h2, and yeah, a pawn push here by Mamedyarov, f4, and now Carlsen just starts pushing b5. Mamedyarov pushes, but it's too little too late. The bishop is covering f1. King f4 is played here, and okay, it's tempting to push your pawns, but Carlsen didn't do that because, well, this is the final trick. You're not going to fall into that as the world champion and get checkmated. Instead, he simply took on e4. Well, actually, the pawn is here. He took on e4, and this gives white time to queen the pawns. So these pawns are unstoppable now. The mate has been prevented, so Mamedyarov actually resigned the game. Good win for Carlsen, who now, after 21 draws in a row, has won 2 chess games in a row, and this puts him in the leader pack with +2, 4 points out of 6. A lot of chess still to be played. We're not yet at the halfway point, but we're getting there, and we'll start to look more into the standings as we go along. Yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for sticking around. I hope you learned something and enjoyed the game. If you want to see another video, it's up there, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. It's down there, and I will see you in another video. Thank you guys. Bye bye.